Also making a ton of money will be Pat McAfee. If he stays where he is and continues to do what he's doing, or if he chooses to take the bag from ESPN. But you wrote about this at OutKick, Gunz. Like, what are you hearing on what ESPN would be willing to put on paper number-wise?
So I think ESPN realizes that they're desperate. I think ESPN is desperate, but it's not. The problem with ESPN is it's an institution, and they're so huge right now that they're in almost a no-win situation, and they've done it to themselves because they've allowed themselves to not really have, to not be able to stand, on firm ground with a lot of what they've done. They've succumbed to the woke culture so much that now they're so scared of having a position, and we're seeing this time after time with them. So I think that ESPN needs Pat McAfee because they really don't have anybody else right now.
But they thought they needed Barstool.
Thought they needed Barstool, and they paid that Barstool, and then
they chose Sam Ponder over Barstool.
And that's what happened. Now, obviously, it's been years since that happened.
Right.
But the same kind of essence. First of all, Pat McAfee's not some of the stuff that goes on at Barstool. Even though he's part of Barstool, he's not.
It's not, but it's also not censored.
Right. And that's why I think if he goes to ESPN, this is a huge mistake on his part. Now, I've known McAfee since, he was doing his stand-up comedy days in Indianapolis, when he was doing his bootleg show. I knew when he went to Barstool in New York. I was in New York City at the time, was friends with a lot of them, still am a lot of friends with them, so I knew him from them.
He's been cool with us.
He's great guy. But what makes the show unique, what you're seeing right now is there's a reason that you rose to prominence. And when you take that away, no matter what the suits promise you, they're lying to you. And when you take that away, that's going to have a major effect on him. So he has to choose. Do you want the possibility of being on the biggest stage, quote unquote? How big is that stage lately, though? There's so much animosity towards an ESPN. There's so much. If you say something, the other day somebody made fun of Lizzo's weight. That's the Pat McAfee show. It's
TK.
Jokes like that. It's that bro culture humor. Do you think he really wants to go there where he might get in trouble for what he says every single time? That's not worth it in my book.
I mean, I heard one of his guys, I was watching the McAfee cast of one of the playoff games, and one of the guys on his show said GD during the telecast. He's like, "You're on ESPN, bub. Can't say that here." And then he just kept going with the play-by-play of what they were doing in the end zone.
Well,
and that's just a small little thing, right, that you've got to get used to. But Gunz, doesn't he have it perfect right now? He may not want the headache of running his own shop and having to do all that and worry about advertising revenue and everything else, but he's got ESPN with College Game Day.
Right.
So they can control that, and he can control everything else uncensored and say and do exactly what he wants on his own show. To me, that sounds like heaven for him.
Yeah, I completely agree. Why go all in on ESPN if you don't have to? Get the best of both worlds right now. They're using him for those alt casts on ESPN2 as well. He has the best, in the best situation in the world right now. I don't know. I don't believe that you have to go full in on ESPN. And, I live on trending. I say I got my eyes to the sky, my my feet to the streets. I live on social media. I read everything. I know everything that's going on. And the backlash was very interesting because it came just a couple of days after Barstool had to fire Mitzi, who also got because they gave up control. So that whole creative control thing is very interesting.
It is, but I also wonder, so South Park exists. South Park is on HBO, which is owned by Warner Brothers.
Is it not on Comedy Central anymore? Did it get taken off?
No, you can see reruns on Comedy Central.
Okay.
But, I mean, you can see any episode and watch any. And again, it's just.
Well, ESPN is not HBO.
Well, but it's a streaming service that HBO Max is, where you can watch any episode of South Park right now. And if you put a disclaimer at the beginning of it, I don't understand how ESPN Plus can have UFC pay-per-views and you can drop any type of promo you want to, from Colby Covington to Bilal Muhammad or anyone else in between, and they can say anything they want to on that mic with Joe Rogan interviewing them, and Dana White can sit there and say literally anything he wants and tout anything he wants at the podium, but ESPN wouldn't let Pat McAfee do that. If ESPN hired Charles Barkley, would they let Barkley be Barkley? I think they absolutely would, because everyone loves Barkley and everyone loves Pat McAfee.
Well, I see it as two very different things, though, because ESPN, and Gunz, you can speak to this, they're mainly concerned with they're afraid.
The
Right?
shareholders,
They
the
walk around
shareholders, yeah.
constantly in fear, and their biggest fear is pissing off the NFL or pissing off the league. They never have to worry about that with Dana White. Dana White's not going to be mad about his guys dropping curse words on there, so ESPN then in turn has nothing to worry about. I think it's far less about the cussing and way more about
The
backlash from a certain segment of social media, and we all know where it's going to come from, and media about an Aaron Rodgers interview or something that's said there weekly, or it's going to be about something him and his guys are talking about that doesn't fit with the narrative that Disney wants to promote.
Humor went too far. The Aaron Rodgers thing's perfect. Like, if this was a year and a half ago and he had signed, and Rodgers, starts, he gets called out. I mean, people still hate Aaron Rodgers. Remember the one guy that refused to vote for him for MVP because which had nothing to do with the play on the field because they can't separate it.
Right.
So imagine this was a year and a half ago. McAfee had signed with ESPN. Rodgers comes on, does that first interview, which went viral, blew up, all that stuff. And all of a sudden, they're like, oh, we're going to start. You can't have this on. This is killing people. This is anti-vaccine. This is blah, blah, blah. This is blah. And now all of a sudden, they go, we're going to go after Disney. Do you honestly think that Suits were not going to talk to McAfee and be like, you can't have him on? They would definitely have told him that he couldn't. And guess what? He didn't have that. There's no way. There's no way, because even on ABC News, they're going after them and saying you can't do this with like Robert F. Kennedy and stuff. They would have definitely said something.
Right,
to
but
Pat.
ESPN was also airing UFC events where they were having actual events during shutdowns of multiple pro sports.
So, but this is your boy. This is your guy, though. This is Pat McAfee. This is probably your future face of your station, though.
Yeah, they're not an ESPN employee.
And when I'm saying that White is up there cussing, I'm saying fighters are using the same language that Bob Huggins did, and it's happening on ESPN pay-per-view.
But they can't tell. It's pay-per-view, and also they can't tell them what to do because they're not ESPN employees.
But it's live.
Pat McAfee would be an ESPN employee.
But it's endorsed by ESPN.
But
it's their contract.
Yes, but ESPN, they only care when it's their contract about that side being mad at them.
So why can't you have Pat McAfee distributed through ESPN but not be their employee?
Because people in power like to wield power. And the moment that Pat McAfee does something they don't like, they're going to tell him to cool it and stop having that guest on or not do it. And I believe Pat McAfee's going to get pissed off about that. Yep. And he's not going to want to be censored, and he's going to want to talk about it. The dude went ham when he got sued by Brett Favre on his show.
That never would have happened.
And said, I am throwing down the gauntlet right now.
Yeah.
If ESPN got sued.
That never would happen. They would have cut the feed.
They would have said, dude, you can't talk about this at all.
Because it would have been Disney lawyers backing him then, and they would not have allowed him to talk.
I don't think he's going to let that fly.
But I don't think McAfee's getting controversial in the way that others would. He's blue, but he's not. I mean, he's not.
I think having Aaron Rodgers on would be controversial to ESPN.
And they report on everything Aaron Rodgers says on the Pat McAfee show.
But them being the ones to carry it, I think that they would. If the league came out and said, we don't like this guest saying this or this happening, point being, I don't think that Pat McAfee wants to be censored. And we could give any number of scenarios that any ESPN employee, talk to anyone who's worked at ESPN about things they were told to say and not say. Right. He's going to be the same way. I mean, they're going to say, avoid this, don't talk about that. I don't know that he's going to like that.
Because he became a success like that because of being who he is. And more props to him. Like I said, I followed him for years, and that's the reaction. You don't want to call it a sellout because it's not really selling out. Like, listen, everyone get their bag as much as they can. Like, make as much money. Listen, congratulations. That's awesome. But are you risking – it's almost – you know what it's almost like? It's almost like CNN or Bud Light pandering to a certain audience but losing your core audience by doing so.
Sure. By the way, if I were Bud Light – I'm glad we got into this. And I think differently than a lot of advertisers would. I would just drop the mother load of advertising money on OutKick and Fox News. Right. And every time someone at OutKick or Fox News had a segment that was bemoaning Bud Light, I would just flood them with ads that went the other way. I'd have girls in bikinis on the beach again. I'd have college frat parties in the ads. And I would do it that way. Instead of killing them with kindness, I would kill them with ad dollars. I would shift my entire market to OutKick. This is me making the plea to Bud Light. Pour money on OutKick and Fox News. That would be
They already have
brilliant.
before.
Yeah.
But they need to double down
now.
They
But I'm
need
saying
to double
this
down.
is where I think differently. Bud Light is thinking, screw those guys for making fun of our marketing decision. I'd be thinking, this is our audience. This is our market, and we've been negatively affected by a piss-poor marketing decision. Let's flood that market with money and show them, you know what? That woman who was with us made a bad decision in marketing, and this is the direction we're going now, and let's show them that way. Yeah. Let's kill them with money. I would absolutely do that if I had the marketing budget of a Bud Light.
It's wild how bad that's gotten, by the way. Oh, my God, that could be a whole other story.
They're down quite a bit.
Well, let me ask you real quick. So, we talked about McAfee and stuff, and we don't continue going on this, but do you think everything, the discussion that we had, that he's probably having too, because he has to realize. I mean, you have guests on there. You have paid ESPN personalities that don't want the word Mount Rushmore being said anymore because they think it's racist, even though it's literally just talking about the greatest 4 athletes. I say Mount Rushmore, I'm not thinking about anything racist. Those are your coworkers now.
Right.
Do you think he wants to deal with that?
Well,
do you think he goes?
But when we say this, we also leave out the fact that Dan Orlovsky prayed on air and still has a job.
Yeah.
That you can get away with both now. And we're seeing that with those speaking out against Leah Thomas and siding with the biological male competing against biological women. There are more people now are stepping up and saying something at ESPN. And honestly, that's what OutKick's supposed to be about.
Damn right.
Where you can say anything you want to on either side and come down the middle and have a conversation instead of an argument. So, I mean, if ESPN wants to get down that path, that's what, I mean, to me, I would be approaching Pat McAfee for that. And as far as, like, why would he want to sell, I don't know, ask Clay Travis or Dave Portnoy. Because they did.
It's not about, to me, about selling. I think that if it's you – look, Clay was never going to make the money that he made selling to Fox running OutKick. I believe that the way Pat McAfee has built this – and what he's done before, he could maybe make the same amount of money. It would just be the headache of running it himself. Now he could sell it to ESPN and not have to worry about it anymore, which would be appealing to me.
It depends what else he wants to do.
Dan Orlovsky and Pat McAfee are two very different personalities.
No. I'm saying, like, there are people that are saying that Mount Rushmore is racist, and I'm saying at the same company, someone prayed on air and wasn't let go. And 5 years ago, that would have been a discussion point.
Yeah, I think if Sam Ponder or Sage Steele, who have replied to me on Twitter, talking about they don't think biological men should compete against women, I think if they stopped an ESPN broadcast to broadcast the show doing that, the way whoever it was had a moment of silence about the Don't Say Gay bill or whatever it was, I think that'd be a big problem for them at ESPN. So I don't think it's completely fair and balanced when it comes to that. And I'm willing to bet that someone went to Dan Orlovsky and said, hey, that's really cool you did that. We don't pray on air. Let's not do it again. They may have had a conversation.
I don't think Dan would have bent the knee to that.
My question would be, would Pat McAfee have the same reaction as Dan Orlovsky to all of this?
I mean,
has Dan Orlovsky ever controlled his own media empire and had all say on no censorship?
I mean, listen,
before?
Pat's leaving FanDuel because he's just like, I don't agree with these people now. Like, it's not what they told me. I'm out. I'm throwing. I'm out.
And
like, he's always called his own shots.
He said we are just dumb enough to want to keep doing things exactly the way we want.
And you can't do that at
he
ESPN,
basically refuted reports that he's talking with ESPN. He's like, I mean, there's a lot of reports out there about this, but we're dumb enough to want to do this exactly the way we want. I don't think he's the type of guy who wants to be censored at all.
Yeah. Especially because he's already on there, like we said, in other entities. So it is interesting because he is obviously a huge thing that's built it all his way. And I'm also all about, like, the freedom aspect. And I've worked at ESPN, and compared to OutKick, it's two different worlds completely.
Well, no doubt.
And so I know what I had, I know what I have now, and it's night and day. And I'm so happy to be here. It's so much better.
Well, and no question. But at the same time, if you're looking for bigger distribution and you want to be a part of whatever WWE ends up doing, which, by the way, that merger with UFC plays a factor in their television rights that's coming up. He's already involved in College Game Day moving forward.
Right.
There's huge value there. And if you're just looking for the distribution angle, but you own your product, who knows what they're willing to put out there.